All right, Alexander, let's talk about a summit that took place, and not one of your normal summits, at least for EU standards. We had a summit that took place between Morawiecki, Orban, and Salvini. In other words, leadership of Poland, of Hungary, and hopefully of Italy. And of course, this has set the globalists at the EU headquarters going crazy. It's absolutely triggered them. And you even had a statement from Donald Tusk. You remember him? He was, I believe he was the former Polish prime minister and also the head of the European Council. I believe that was Tusk's past position. I remember him at the EC. And he actually called this summit an organization of the pro-Putin political bloc, of course. When in doubt, blame Putin, blame Russia. But look, I think this is a good meeting and a good summit to take place. And there could be no doubt that Orban, I would say Orban, has been the steady, that steady fixture in Europe that has been very much pro-Hungary, pro-nation state, pro-reason, pro-logic, pro-rationality, I would say. And he's definitely been the one person that has pushed back on the woke globalist ideology that Europe continues to push us all towards. So, and then of course Salvini, we've talked about him at great length, and we've done many videos on Poland as well. So Alexander, what do you make of this summit and of this meeting?
Well, I think it is actually a watershed moment. Now, Orban is clearly the leader, and he's clearly the convener of this meeting. And as you absolutely rightly said, he's been for a long time the big thorn in the flesh of the EU integrationists and the EU globalists, who absolutely loathe and detest him. I mean, if you read what people like, say, Paul Krugman in the United States write about Orban, if you read what Soros writes about Orban, there was an extraordinary exchange between them, of statements and messages between them, which we discussed in earlier videos. If you see what is written in places like The Guardian about Orban, you realise how detested by the sort of neoliberal elite in Europe and the United States Orban is. Nonetheless, he is clearly a power to be reckoned with within Europe and within the EU. And what he is intent on doing, and he's spoken about it quite openly, is he is talking about setting up within the EU a Christian democratic, he was careful to say a real Christian democratic bloc. And so he has drawn to himself the two leaders, one Morawiecki, who is the Prime Minister of Poland, who leads a party, the Law and Justice Party in Poland, which is openly and strongly Christian and Catholic and conservative in the same way as Orban is. And of course, Matteo Salvini in Italy, who is the leader of the Northern League, but who is also straightforwardly and openly and unashamedly Catholic and Christian. So these three leaders are taking a position of forming a conservative Christian bloc within the EU. Now, they haven't yet said that it's going to be a formal bloc within the European Parliament, because they are one vote short of 25 votes in the European Parliament, which is what you need to create such a bloc. But that's in effect what they are doing. And of course, the other key point is that this alliance that's been forged between Morawiecki, between the Poles and the Hungarians, led by Orban, gives them tremendous leverage in the European Council. Now, many of the most important decisions in the European Council, and by the way, also in the European Council of Ministers, have to be made unanimously. If one country objects, then exercises its veto, then at least in theory, that decision can't be made. Now, the danger that's always been faced by any small country or relatively small country that tries to exercise its veto and does so publicly and vocally in a open way, in defiance of the big EU powers, is that if they do that, they risk a decision by the European Council to suspend their voting rights. But that can only happen if all the other countries agree to it. So if in a situation that may arise in the future, Orban decides to veto, let us say, the EU budget, as he came very close to doing just a few months ago, he knows that he can do that without having Hungary's voting rights on the EU Council suspended, because he's got the Poles at his back. The Poles will veto any decision to suspend Hungary's voting rights. So already you can see Poland and Hungary working together at the level of the EU Council. Now, the other interesting thing about this meeting is they've reached out to Salvini. Now, Salvini has, as we've discussed in a recent programme, I mean, he's recently compromised in all kinds of ways by forging, if you like, a kind of agreement with the arch-Europeanist Mario Draghi to make Mario Draghi Prime Minister of Italy. And that has clearly damaged Salvini's position in Italy, just as we said it would. So Salvini, by teaming up with Orban and Morawiecki, is, I think, trying to tell his supporters in Italy, look, I know I did this thing with Draghi. I know you don't like the fact I did it, but I am in fact and in reality and deep down still the person you thought I was. I am still on your side. I am still going to work with Orban and Morawiecki against the integrationists and the globalists. And if you trust me and put me in a position to lead Italy one day, then that is the line I'm going to follow. So that's Salvini's calculation, I think, in joining with this grouping. And of course, if the situation ever does arise where he does become Prime Minister of Italy, he will be able to join this grouping with the other two, and then that would be a very powerful bloc indeed, because Italy is one of the big three within the European Union, along with Germany and France. So that shows you that this is a big event. It's an important event. The Poles and the Hungarians have worked alongside each other in the past, but now they're institutionalizing their relationship, and they have a potentially powerful ally in Italy as well. So we will see how it all shapes out. But I think this is a watershed moment. Now, there's been some comment about the fact that Marine Le Pen is not part of this grouping. I think an important thing to say about Marine Le Pen, and what I think differentiates her from Orban, Salvini and Morawiecki, is that whereas this is a very overtly Christian grouping, Marine Le Pen is, by contrast, much more of a French nationalist, patriotic, secular Republican. So that is what actually makes her different from this group. But if she were to become president of France next year, she would unquestionably be, to a great extent, aligned with them also.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting development, and I agree it is a watershed moment. I mean, what you have right now is you have You have the EU and the globalists are gunning for Orban. We know that. They've been trying to take him out for a while. And we've done many programs on the fighting he's had with George Soros, the most prominent, most powerful globalist of them all. And Orban has decided to take Soros on head on. I mean, he's going after Soros. Soros is going after him. And so far, I would say that Orban has won every fight so far, but the globalists are going after Orban. We also have done many videos in the past where we've highlighted how Poland would be perhaps an easier target for the globalists to flip, because the society is very much split, roughly 50-50 as far as pro-EU and Eurosceptics. So Poland would probably be an easier target at first for the globalists to flip over to the EU side of things. But so far, Poland has held strong. But it's a 50-50 split, so it could go either way in the future. So we have to keep an eye out on Poland. We've done many videos on Salvini as well, but I think you laid it out. They're gunning after Orban. They're looking to flip Poland to the EU globalist side of things. You also have Marine Le Pen, who may become president of France. What if Salvini does manage to become the leader in Italy and they get rid of Draghi? You have an EU that is the weakest it's ever been. I mean, we did a video on Ursula von der Leyen just completely getting played and schooled and embarrassed by Erdogan. It's obvious that the European leadership, the European Union leadership, has zero respect on the world stage, absolutely zero respect. And Orban pretty much, and Erdogan pretty much displayed it for the whole world to see. He did it on purpose. There's no doubt about that. And he absolutely humiliated them. You have Angela Merkel, who is on her way out. You have Mark Rutte in the Netherlands, who is plagued by scandal after scandal after scandal. Things can really change here if we continue towards this trajectory and Orban consolidates his, I don't want to say his power, but consolidates this movement. Let's call it this movement. On a side note, Orban is making moves. I was reading an article the other day that says Hungary now has the highest gold reserves per capita in Central and Eastern Europe. And I think that's important because one of the reasons that Poland and Hungary are so untouchable by the EU is because they're not on the euro. So they have a little more latitude and freedom to take on the globalists.
That's exactly right. And can I just say, I mean, Orban hoarding gold in that way is his way of ensuring against a attack on Hungary's currency. I mean, that's what that's all about. I mean, he is obviously very, very concerned. And as all sensible leaders who hold out against the globalist, the globalist system have to be, that at any particular moment in time, they will try and attack a country and a government of that country through its currency. So just like Putin in Russia has hoarded foreign currency and gold and has kept debt levels very low, Orban is following exactly the same course within the EU, and he's hoarded gold and foreign currency to insulate Hungary against that kind of a risk. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's an emerging coalition of groups. Poland is very divided, exactly as you said. It could tip from one moment to the other in either direction. At the moment, Law and Justice, Morawiecki's party, are very much in control, but it could go back to the sort of people who are closely identified and associated with Donald Tusk, who was the Prime Minister of Poland and who you discussed earlier in this programme, and whose comments, by the way, about how this is a pro-Russian bloc are just absolutely bonkers. I mean, Morawiecki and the Law and Justice Party are vehemently, viscerally anti-Russian. To talk about them forming part of a pro-Russian bloc is ridiculous. I mean, Orban has good relations with Putin and Russia. Salvini has good relations with Putin but Morawiecki and the Law and Justice Party absolutely do not. There is nothing pro-Russian about this bloc, and we should leave the question of Russia completely outside all discussions of it. So it's things could tip. I mean, on the one hand, Orban looks pretty stable and secure in Hungary itself, where he is a strongly popular and very supported leader. He has his critics. Every political leader in any democratic country has his critics, and they're particularly strong in Budapest. But overall, his position in Hungary looks secure. Salvini is in government, but not in power, in the sense that he's supporting Draghi and could bring Draghi down, but he's not Prime Minister of Italy. He's not in control of Italy. So he's got a lot of work to do if he ever achieves that position. And of course, he suffered some political damage, a lot of political damage, through his decision to back Draghi. So Salvini may be somewhat of the way to that. And Poland, Law and Justice do at the moment seem to be firmly in control, but the country is deeply divided. The west of Poland is much more liberal and more pro-EU than the east of Poland is. And of course, it's also going through a difficult transition in the sense that the long-time leader of Law and Justice, Jarosław Kaczyński, looks likely to retire from his de facto leadership of that party. And it's not completely clear who exactly is going to take over from him once he is gone. So he's a somewhat elusive person, because Kaczynski doesn't actually hold any formal cabinet rank. I believe he was designated as Deputy Prime Minister, but I don't know to what extent he exercises that office, but he's not either President or Prime Minister of Poland, and yet he is the de facto leader of the country. He gets on very closely with Orban, but he is likely to retire from Polish politics shortly, and he is very much the dominant figure within Law and Justice. So we will see whether whoever succeeds Kaczynski has his strength of personality and ability to dominate Polish politics in the way that Kaczynski has done over the last few years. So Poland is looking less certain, but at the moment, it is part of this grouping. It remains a strong part of Orban's coalition. And I would add that even if Law and Justice were to lose power in Poland, and Poland as a state were to switch, Law and Justice will surely remain a powerful political force in Poland, with deputies in the European Parliament, which would presumably continue to be allied to Orban's Fidesz party. So it's a grouping that's starting to emerge. It's beginning to get an institutional character. Orban is clearly its leader. As you said, absolutely rightly, the other side are in increasing disarray. Merkel is due to leave in September, and I mean, it's now almost universally accepted that she's leaving a Germany that is looking increasingly in disarray, and her party, the CDU-CSU bloc that she leads, are also looking to be in disarray, and the situation in Germany looks far less stable than it has ever done at any time since the end of the Second World War. Macron in France is widely disliked, and it's far from certain that he's going to win re-election next year in the presidential elections. On the contrary, it's starting to look as if President Le Pen is a real possibility, and that, of course, would be a game changer. And Mark Rutte in the Netherlands, as you say correctly, is submerged in a corruption scandal. So problems on both sides, but problems of corruption on the one side and scandal and political failure, whereas on the other side, it's structural problems more than political problems, in the sense that Salvini is not in power and Kaczynski in Poland is due to retire from politics fairly soon, and the political position of Poland anyway is deeply divided. So we'll see how this turns out, but certainly this is a concerted pushback and resistance within the EU to the globalist integrationist structures of a sort that it has never faced before.
What are the chances that Austria join this group?
Highly likely. I mean, Kurz also is basically from a Christian democratic tradition. His political instincts, I think, would draw him very strongly in that direction. And of course, we're looking at, in a way, a Central European group. And Austria fits very, very neatly into that. If you go to Austria, by the way, one of the things you realise when you're there, is that Austria is obviously a German nation, but it is a German nation that looks more clearly towards Central Europe and even towards Eastern Europe than Germany itself does. It has a distinct character that's difficult to define precisely, but which, when you visit it, you can sense it at once. So, I mean, Austria was once, the Austrian, the Habsburg Empire, of which Hungary was the other big component part, and Austria-Hungary, the Habsburg Empire, always had a close traditional friendship with Poland. So they make together the historic Catholic heartland of Central Europe. So it's a neat tie-up if you think about it, and I think Kurz's politics play into that quite closely. I think if you see the change of power in Germany in September, that some people are talking about, with the CDU-CSU losing power, and with the new coalition of the Greens, the SPD, and the FDP forming a more left-of-centre coalition, then I think Kurz might be strongly attracted to joining the Orban, Morawiecki, Salvini grouping, because I think many conservatives in Austria will feel nervous about remaining so close to a Germany that is appearing to swing left. What, of course, holds people like Kurz back and makes it more difficult is this endless propaganda about how Orban is a dictator, how the Law and Justice Party in Poland are, embryonic dictators also, how this is all an alliance, a coalition of the extreme right. Kurz wants to distance himself and to keep a distance from all of that. But this is a changing situation. And as I said, if Germany begins to shift left, then I can certainly see Austria beginning to sort of coalesce with this group also, into which culturally and ideologically a Kurz-led Austria seems to fit reasonably well. I would also add, by the way, on the subject of Kaczynski, that I said that the Law and Justice Party is viscerally anti-Russian. It's perhaps fair to say that it's Kaczynski himself who is viscerally anti-Russian, because he blames, wrongly in my opinion, the Russians for the death of his brother, who died in a plane crash whilst he was president and was visiting Katyn to commemorate the massacre of Polish prisoners by the Soviet NKVD there. And Kaczynski's always had this issue with Russia ever since then, and issue with Putin personally. But if Kaczynski retires from the scene, it may be that this issue, which has been a problem, will gradually ease, and with Orban, Salvini, and Kurz all wanting to have good relations with Russia, which also has, in a sense, a kind of Christian democratic policy at the moment, you might start to see law and justice starting to adjust to that. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I only mentioned that last point because some people see the issue of Russia as dividing Poland from the rest of this grouping. But as I said, if Kaczynski leaves the scene, it may be that can be that problem can be solved. We'll see.
All right, a final question. I agree. We have to keep our eye out on Austria because I think that Austria could make the difference. Kurz is a very skilled politician, very clever. If he senses that Austria is moving strongly towards a traditional conservative type of opinion, type of ideology, and he sees that Orban is strong in his position with this group, and Poland is strong with its position in this group, he may join them. There's no doubt about it. Orban is an incredibly skilled politician. I mean, he's an operator. He is an operator. And a lot of people don't give him credit for the fact that he operates so well, even under attack by very strong and powerful forces. Very impressive leader. Very, very impressive leader.
Absolutely.
Going off of that, what happens if you start getting other states looking at these guys and saying, I think they're onto something. Czech Republic, Slovenia, Croatia. I don't know. I'm picking some other countries in the periphery, other countries that can also perhaps fit into this coalition and say, you know what, we've had enough of this Merkelism, this globalism. It's just completely led us astray. We need to join these guys. They have the momentum.
I think that's absolutely right. Now, first of all, just to say about Orban. Orban is a real politician. That's what makes him different from so many of these other figures you see around Europe. I mean, Orban is a tremendously skilled tactician. I mean, he knows how to do all the things that politicians need to do. You know, all the backstairs work that is an unavoidable part of politics. But he is charismatic. He is strong. He is able to lead the Hungarian people and to communicate with them in a way that other European leaders simply can't. I mean, I was in France watching an address that Macron gave to the French people, and I found it bizarre, actually. I mean, it seemed so detached from reality whilst I was watching it, and I could sense the same feeling from all the French people who were there with me. And Merkel, when she now speaks on television, apparently it's the same response. Orban knows how to talk to people. He knows how to communicate. He knows how to go out, rally, speak to them, win them over, and do those sort of things. And that's why he's so strong. And, of course, within Hungary, he has what Russians call the power of decision, the ability to make decisions and to make them stick. He doesn't do what Merkel always does, which is hide, wait to see who's stronger, and then back them and keep, whatever opinions she may have to herself until that moment. That isn't Orban's style at all. And Kurz has some of that flair too, it must be said. Now, we'll see if those two get together. Yes, I agree, that would make a very, very formidable force. And of course, the other thing to say about Austria is that, of course, it's an important country within Europe. It's small, but it's centrally located, and it has a tremendous diplomatic tradition behind it, which is still, by the way, real. I mean, Austrian diplomacy does still have, believe it or not, a reality. I mean, diplomats from Austria are still highly trained, very capable. And I don't agree with you on one point. I don't think this is a peripheral grouping. I see it instead as a grouping that is starting to emerge in the Catholic Central European heartland of the EU. It's the heartland, it's the centre of the EU, if you like, that is starting to coalesce and come together. The periphery, in a strange kind of way, is the northwest, the areas around, in places like, the northern cities, of which I suppose Paris is in a way one, which have a completely different, much more liberal, much more globalist outlook than, if you like, the heartland regions, which are the ones we are talking about. So, in a way, it's the heartland versus the coastal regions, a little bit like what you're seeing in the United States, where the red states are in the centre and the blue states are along the coasts. And I think you're starting to see something of that same pattern starting to emerge in Europe too.
No, but I mean the periphery with respect to other countries in and around this heartland. Like I said, say Czech Republic, say Croatia,
Absolutely.
say other countries that are also do have a Catholic tradition. Do you see them saying, you know what, we need to align ourselves with Orban and Kurz and these guys, and just forget Merkel. It's been a failure for God knows how many decades. Just forget about it. We need a change of direction. I mean, this periphery.
I absolutely agree, and absolutely,
like a domino effect.
I think it's entirely possible that you could start to see all of these Central European countries, Catholic Central European countries, starting to coalesce around this grouping. The Czech Republic, which I visited in the summer when we could still travel, or at least when we were allowed to travel briefly. The Czech Republic certainly is one possibility. Slovakia is definitely another. Slovakia has very close historic connections to Hungary, by the way, and for those who are wine connoisseurs, as I am, it shares the famous Tokaj vineyard with Hungary. Croatia, another. Slovenia, definitely a further one. So you could start to see all this grouping begin to coalesce with Austria too, if you like, the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, plus Poland, and it would be a formidable political force in Central Europe. And bear in mind that there are a lot of people in Germany who think as they do, a lot of people in France who think as they do also, a lot of people in Italy, of course, perhaps more in Italy still, who think as they do. So a Central European grouping, but one which is also draws support from large parts of Southern Europe also. So, it's potentially a very big challenge. We'll see how it works out. But I think this could be a watershed moment. It could be a moment where, as I said, history starts to be made. Orban certainly gives the impression of being a figure of historic importance. But of course, history can take strange turns and odd twists, and we'll just have to see how things turn out in future.
Yeah, I agree. The globalists are absolutely terrified of this. They're going to go after Hungary hard. They're going to go after Poland hard. And we all need to be aware of that. But you know what I like about all of this is many of the countries that we've talked about, not all of them, but many of them are not on the euro. And I think that's the key. That's what gives them the freedom and the latitude to actually strike back against Merkel and Brussels and the EU headquarters there. That's what gives them the freedom, and Lagarde and all these people. They could push back against the globalists because many of these countries that we've mentioned, they don't use the euro.
Absolutely, you're entirely right. But the globalists, it's important to remember, still are in control. They still have the levers of power. They still have the levers of power within Europe, and the EU institutions work for them. So at the moment, they are still in charge. They look to be in disarray. Merkel, their unofficial leader, is about to leave the scene. As I said, leaving everything in Germany in a mess. Rutte is tied down in corruption scandals. Macron is collapsing under the weight of his own absurdity. Ursula von der Leyen can't even get Erdogan to provide her with a chair. So, I mean, none of them look very impressive at the moment. But, we've also seen how vicious and how aggressive they can be when they have to be. So, I mean, this is going to be an epic battle. I mean, this is not going to resolve itself easily or soon. And we'll see how it turns out. But this is an important event, and it could become not just an important event, but a historic one.
All right, guys, we'll put a link to the Duran shop, 10% off all the merchandise down below. Take care.